Support for today's episode comes from Amazon. Amazon is working toward a carbon free energy future, doing more with less, investing where it matters most, and supporting communities where we operate. Minnesota decides who should own the grid's batteries. Minnesota regulators approved one of the nation's largest utility owned distributed battery programs over aggregator objections, endorsing one answer to a question that will shape distributed energy markets for years. Should utilities build and own flexible capacity themselves, or buy it from competitive providers? Minnesota regulators did more than approve a battery program. They endorsed one answer to a question that will shape distributed energy markets over the next decade. When utilities need flexible capacity, should they build and own it themselves or procure it from competitive providers? The Minnesota Public Utilities Commission approved Xcel Energy's Capacity Connect program in early April, clearing the way for the utility to spend up to $430 million deploying, owning, and operating 200 megawatts of commercial and industrial battery storage located at customer sites through 2028. It is one of the nation's largest utility-owned distributed battery programs built entirely around utility ownership rather than customer or third-party ownership. And the decision arrives as regulators in several states debate whether distributed batteries should primarily be utility assets or be developed through competitive markets. Why aggregators fought the utility-owned model. A coalition of customer-owned distributed energy resource aggregators, backed by companies including Sunrun, challenged the program in filings with the Commission, arguing that Xcel's sole source selection of Spark Fund to develop and run Capacity Connect shut out competitors who could deliver comparable flexibility at lower cost. Aggregators pointed to the growing base of third-party owned distributed storage and solar projects already operating across multiple states as evidence that a competitive procurement process, rather than a single vendor utility build-out, could meet the same need. Chris Villarreal, a former Minnesota PUC policy director now affiliated with the free market-oriented R Street Institute, told regulators that Xcel's plan to give Spark Fund access to grid and customer data unavailable to competitors risked letting the utility exercise monopoly power over a market it should instead be opening up. The Commission approved it anyway, with conditions. The Commission sided with Xcel, but attached conditions rather than approving the plan outright. It directed the utility to address environmental justice and community benefit considerations in siting decisions, and to partner with a construction trades apprenticeship program to broaden workforce access to the jobs the build-out creates. Clean energy advocacy group Fresh Energy backed the outcome, framing utility-owned storage as a way to displace fossil generation without waiting on a slower-moving competitive market to scale. Several solar and storage trade groups called the decision a missed opportunity, arguing that storage assets managed as strategic, multi-owner grid resources rather than utility-controlled infrastructure tend to attract more private capital into a state's distributed energy market over time. The underlying dispute is about cost, not just ownership. Beneath the ownership question is a cost dispute regulators did not fully resolve. Stakeholders in the docket argued that the proposal was more expensive than comparable competitive approaches, a comparison Xcel disputed by pointing to the reliability and cybersecurity benefits of direct utility control over dispatch. Neither side's figures were independently verified in the Commission's public record, and the program's actual cost performance will not be clear until Xcel begins deploying batteries under the approved plan. That uncertainty mirrors a broader pattern playing out as states approve large battery procurements aimed at easing capacity constraints. Battery storage has become an increasingly common resource for meeting peak demand, but the business model for deploying it at scale is still being negotiated state by state. Why this decision extends beyond Minnesota. Minnesota's approval does not settle the utility ownership question nationally, but it stands as one of the first major regulatory approvals of a utility-owned portfolio of customer-sited battery storage designed to provide dispatchable capacity, giving other state regulators facing the same choice a real program to evaluate rather than a hypothetical one. If Capacity Connect delivers the reliability benefits Xcel promised at a cost comparable to competitive alternatives, other utilities pursuing similar demand side flexibility programs will have a precedent to point to. If the sole source structure produces the cost overruns or market foreclosure effects aggregators warned about, the decision becomes a cautionary example instead. Either way, companies planning around future electricity costs in states weighing similar programs now have a concrete case study, not just competing regulatory filings, to evaluate before their own state commissions confront the same choice between utility ownership and competitive markets. Sustainability Soundbites energy coverage is sponsored by Amazon. Visit the link in our show notes to learn more about Amazon's Spotlight on Energy. For sponsorship opportunities with Environment and Energy Leader, please reach out to a member of our team.